This is Craig Hayworth from the Winning Youth Coaching Podcast. You're listening to Dave Westwood on the new and noteworthy podcast.
Are you ready to experience the future? Welcome to the new and noteworthy podcast, where it's out with the old and in with the new. Dave Westwood brings you the celebrities of tomorrow as today's newest podcasters share their stories, their journey, and their show. So get ready, because the new and noteworthy podcast starts now.
My next guest has been an actress, a writer, producer, and director in Hollywood for nearly 2 decades. She's taken that knowledge and is now a seminar leader, public speaker, and coach in the industry. She's also the Greenlight coach and the host of the podcast, Finding Happily Ever After. Jessica Sitomer, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Great to have you. Tell us a little bit about yourself before we talk about the podcast, because you got a pretty interesting journey.
I do. You know, I started out when I was 4 years old, absolutely in love with Mickey Dolenz from the Monkees, because he was the funny one. So for those of you who are young and listening to that, just imagine like the Jonas Brothers, but like back in the 70s. And one day I was watching the Monkees, and Mickey comes out like he always does, only this time he was with a little girl who was my height, had the same long blonde curly hair as I do, and I just screamed. And my mom came running, and I said, "Who is that girl, and why is she with Mickey?" And my mom realized that the house wasn't on fire, nobody was breaking in, so she calmed down a little bit, and she said, "Oh, she's an actress." And I said, "What's an actress?" So she told me what an actress was, and I said, "Well, I want to be an actress." And my mom said, "Well, you've got to know people." And I said, "Well, I know people. I know my babysitters. I know my cousins." So I asked all my babysitters and all my cousins if they knew the Monkees, and none of them did. But one babysitter and one cousin gave me their full set of Monkee albums, and I still have them, so don't lend me things. And I decided that if I learned every word to every Monkee song and walked around singing them, that somebody who I didn't know was bound to point at me and say, "Hey, you should be on the Monkees." And that's what I did. I memorized every single Monkee song, walked around singing them. It would have been a great time for my parents to explain syndication to me, because I'd actually, they hadn't been recording it in years. But, hey, they didn't want to break a little girl's heart. But that's when I fell in love with romantic comedies and acting and movies and television. And so as I grew older, I continued to pursue. I would write, I would act. And then after I graduated college, I had to break it to my dad that I had been leading him on with the whole advertising thing through college. But in reality, I really wanted to pursue a career in entertainment. And I did. And I have done all those things that you talked about me doing. And then I also started a coaching business, because I found that people in the entertainment industry knew their art, their skill, their craft, but they didn't know how to generate work. They didn't know how to network properly. They didn't even like talking to people, most of them. So, I wanted to teach them how great it was to create relationships, and that when you actually had business tools to treat your independent contracting business, which applies to anybody who's an independent contractor and has their own business, entrepreneurs, small business owners, that if you treat it like you're the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, you reevaluate the way that you're doing work. And so that's how I got into speaking and coaching and authoring and all those great things.
Well, it's interesting, and unfortunately, I didn't have to ask who Mickey Dolenz was. So, you also had another inspiration that you've mentioned on quite a few occasions, and that's the movie Pretty Woman.
Yes. Well, first of all, I think for most people in the entertainment industry, they had that moment that they saw something that they said, that I wish I had done that. And I remember I was in my college dorm, and my boyfriend said, "Hey, we're going to go see a movie on campus tonight, Pretty Woman." I'm like, "What's it about?" He's like, "A prostitute." I'm like, "What?" And then I get there, and I see this movie, and as I'm watching it, I was like, this would have been my dream role. And I just loved everything about it. And the funny thing is that if you had read the original script, it was a really, really dark script. So Gary Marshall turned it around into a comedy, and it just had a really strong impact on me, and that's when I knew I had to be truthful, because, as I said, I was in college at the time telling my parents I was going to go into advertising, and that's when I knew that, no, this was not something that was just, like, in the back of my mind. This was something that I am determined to do, and that's what I do. I write romantic comedies, I act in them, I and constantly living them. I think that when you get what you expect. What you focus on is what you see. And being the kind of person who is just totally focused on romantic comedies, I find those moments in my life every single day.
Well, you've certainly done a lot in the industry, in front of the camera, behind the camera, and now with coaching. But for a while, you kind of got burnout,
Yep.
for lack of a better term. You talked about this at length in one of your podcasts. Why don't you share kind of what happened there? Because I think it leads you on to where you're at now.
Well, I know for myself, I was basically type A from the moment I was out of the womb. So when I was in high school, most people had 1 or 2 or 3 extracurricular activities for their college application. I had 18, and each one had subdivisions of A, B, C. If I couldn't make the cheerleading squad because I couldn't do splits or anything like that, so I created my own hockey cheerleading squad so that we could cheer for our hockey friends and didn't have to do splits. So I was one of those really high-achieving women who was successful in everything I put my mind to, and that carried into my 20s. And when I started my own business in the 30s, it was even more. There was so much more pressure on me to succeed and learn as much as I could. And at the time, I'd just been through a major breakup with somebody who I'd been living with for 7 years, and he was just boom, out. I was over that. You can learn all about him in the podcast too.
That's one of the podcasts I listened to, one of the episodes.
He's quite entertaining. But what happened is, you reach a certain age, like women over 35, and there's certain things that you stop producing in your body. Your thyroid's not working the same way it did when you were 20, and you're so used to working at such a high level rate that you burn out your adrenals, and all this stuff starts happening, and you're working as hard as you've always worked, but yet your body is not functioning the way it always functioned to support you. And I found myself in this MRI machine one day, and they were studying my brain, trying to figure out why I was having all these strange things happening. And I'm like, oh, what is going on? What has happened to my life? And, it's funny, the doctors couldn't figure it out. They couldn't find anything, but a nutritionist figured it out for me. I was actually suffering from borderline Hashimoto's, which is a autoimmune that affects the thyroid when you have a gluten intolerance. And that's what it turned out to be. So I talk about her a lot in the podcast, and all the things that she took away from me, she took away my ability to have chocolate and sugar and all the things I love, like cupcakes, and told me I was an addict. And I said, how do you know I'm an addict? That's a very strong word. And she said, what would you do if I told you could never have a cupcake again? And I started to cry, and she said, that's how I know you're an addict. So, yeah, it got to the point, though, that I was so burnt out that I lost my motivation to do things. I wasn't excited about things anymore. I was exhausted all the time. I wasn't working out. I just wasn't me. And I didn't even recognize who I was. And that was very frustrating for me and very confusing, because I'd always had goals and known what I wanted and been, able to accomplish whatever I wanted. And suddenly I was finding myself in a very different place in my life. So burnout is not a fun place to be. And a lot of times you don't really know that you're even on that path and getting there. You ignore the symptoms, you ignore the signs. And that's why I really like talking not only to women, 35 and up, who are actually either getting close to burnout or experiencing burnout and helping them get back, but also to talk to those overachieving 20-year-olds who I know that are acting just like I acted, so that I make sure that they don't do the things that I used to do.
Do you think someone that goes 24/7 the way you did when you were younger kind of hastens that burnout, or do you think that's something that would kind of come anyway just because of age and, like you said, some of the changes that your body goes through?
No, I definitely think that it speeds up the process, because you are working at such a high level that it's just screwing with all of the different things that your body does, as far as constant release of adrenaline, which, people who are just not high pushers, I don't want to say that they're not high achieving, or they're, but there's definitely a difference, I find, between the women who are really into yoga and who are relaxed and are on this very different path than these, and they're like moms who, are they have the whole plan out for their kids, and they're very relaxed about it and they know how to work with them. And then they're the high-achieving mothers who have to make the food for the kids, and they have to make sure that they've researched and got their binder together for their preschool, even though they're still in the womb. And, like, you know, it's like the mothers who are, like, doing all that stuff. And they're just, like, 10 times more likely to burn out faster because their adrenaline's constantly going. They're constantly thinking, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? What's next? What's next? They can't just be in the moment and enjoy the moment with their kids. They're constantly like, what's next? What activity am I going to put them in? Like, you can even hear how my voice changes when I start, the speed, the tempo, like when I start talking about the different types of women. And it definitely affects everything faster.
Yeah, and it's hard to kind of turn that switch on and off, I would imagine.
Yeah, and, you know, I've spoken to men, too, because they've been, you know, if I'm at couples things, they'll hear us talking, and they're like, you know, men go through burnout, too. Like, you know, I work on Wall Street, and I totally get burned out, and, you know, and I had to, you know, I like, retired early, and so men get burnout, too. But again, it comes from, you know, these high-pressure situations that they put themselves in. And it's going to be very different from somebody who, you know, is a carpenter and finds it very zen to, like, you know, create what he's creating and he's happy about what he's doing and he's working for good people, as opposed to somebody who's working on Wall Street and is constantly being screamed at and has all this pressure and is dealing with, you know, millions and billions of dollars. Like, so there's, you know, you never know what's going to cause burnout in different people. A lot of it has to do with their personality as well.
That being said, I mean, you kind of, when you reached this point, you definitely took some time for yourself, but, you know, you kind of went back into the business.
Yes.
You know, even to talk about that transition and what, okay, I'm going a million miles an hour, stepping back, relax. You know, why jump back into the fire?
Because I jumped into the fire with better habits. So in other words, where I used to wake up, pull my laptop onto my lap, immediately start doing work, and I would just get completely obsessed with it until my dogs would be like, hey, time to feed us, time to go for a walk. And I'm like, oh, okay, it's that time. And while you're eating, let me grab something. And then the next thing I know, they're like, hey, time to go for a walk, time to feed us. I'm like, wait, it's nighttime? And so then I'd be, you know, all wound up from working all day and not leaving my couch. And I'd just turn on the TV to just kind of wind down. And yet I'd be watching like 24 with Jack Bauer, which does not wind you down at all, until I was so exhausted that I would fall asleep. And then once I fall asleep, I wake up and I do the same thing the next day. And it would go on and on like that because I just felt like I didn't have time for anything else but to focus on my work and make sure that, you know, success. And once I was burnt out and I couldn't do that anymore, I started getting into yoga. I started getting into meditation. I started taking vacations, and I started scheduling things differently. I started training my clients that there are only certain days that I'll work with them. There are only certain hours that I'll do certain things. And, you know, when I get up in the morning, I'm going to meditate, or before I go to bed, I always do. And I schedule everything so that I know that I have enough time to get done. It takes all of that busy mind that happens when you're like overwhelmed because you're like, I have so much to do. But if you schedule everything, you realize not only do you have time for everything, but there's all this blank time left over. And so what I always do is I schedule my yoga first because that's telling my brain I'm taking care of me first. And that also changed, you know, that whole mindset once I got into yoga and meditation. And then I started eating better. And the way you eat also really, really affects all the things going on in your body and all those changes. And also how often I eat. And it's different for everyone, which is why I suggest meeting with nutritionists and chiropractors and acupuncturists and doctors and whoever appeals to you so that you can find out how your body functions best. But when I interview a lot of women, because that's what I did before launching the podcast, I just started interviewing like groups of friends from college and we'd all get on the phone together and talk. And the thing that just kept coming up was that nobody, you know, they all have these amazing to-do lists, but nobody puts themselves on their to-do list. So I put myself first all the time, other than my dog. You know, she has to get taken care of. But, I mean, other than that, like I really make sure that I am taken care of, that I am eating well, that I am sleeping well, that I am exercising, that I'm doing my yoga, and that I am training my clients and they're working around my schedule. And it really, I mean, I'm spending 5 weeks right now in Georgia at my friend's lake house. I work like a few hours a day. That's it. Everything's mobile. And, you know, it's something I never would have done. I never would have left LA and gone anywhere for fear that I would miss something. And now it's like I travel all the time. You know, after I leave here, I go to Colorado. After I go to Colorado, I go to Las Vegas. After I go to Las Vegas, I go to LA. After I go to LA, I go to Florida. And then it all starts again. But I love it because now it's on my terms, so I don't feel overwhelmed by it. I don't feel stressed out by it.
I actually heard on another podcast, and for the life of me right now, it escapes me, but the same theme came across, that working on yourself first is probably the biggest single priority. Now, you mentioned technology a little bit and, you know, being able to do things mobile. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you know, we're talking 2014. That's probably something you couldn't do 10, 15 years ago with your business. But at the same time, you're kind of chained to the technology because it's always accessible.
Right.
So is it kind of a blessing or a curse or both?
It's kind of both. It's interesting. This particular, on my podcast, let's see, what are they? I think it's like episodes 43 through 47. I interview a woman named Terry Monahan who does time triage. And she talks all about this electronic, like, addiction that we all have and how we have to literally turn off certain things at certain times of day. And again, it comes down to scheduling. You know, I know that I look at my phone too much, but the one commitment I made to myself was that I was not going to look at my computer before I go to bed while I'm on vacation. You know, even though I'm working and it's not technically vacation, like I'm treating it as such because when you look at the screen before you go to sleep, I don't know, they're doing all kinds of searches and studies and finding, you know, how it really keeps you alert and it affects your sleep. So, yes, I couldn't have done it 10 years ago, but still, we found other ways to do it. Like right now, they're doing Kickstarter, and that's how people are raising money online. Well, back then, I was running around and asking 1,000 people for $20 to get a pilot shot. And either way, I'm still attached to the results, which is still creating the same feelings in the body. So, you know, the people of this generation with all the media and all the social media and the laptops and the tablets and the cell phones and the Bluetooth in the car, like we're always connected, but I think that just adds to the ability to get burned out faster. Even though it's making it easier for us to do things in some ways, it's also stressing us more. So that's why I call it from burnout, you know, going from burnout and back, because I came back with these new ways of doing things.
You've definitely done a lot of different things the second time around, and you reference a lot of that in your podcast. One interesting thing that I found out about you living that Hollywood-type lifestyle is that you don't drink.
Right.
So tell us a little bit more about that, because there's a whole thing that you talk about.
Well, it's funny because when I lived in New York, I grew up in New York, and I would say to people, I'd go to the bars, and I basically stopped drinking when I was 15. And I found out that, you know, it's okay to say that to a cop because the statute of limitations are up. So, but, I drank too much peppermint schnapps one night and got really sick and said, I'm never doing that again. So when I would go out in New York, I was like, no, I really don't feel like drinking. And, you know, I don't drink. And they're like, just drink. Come on. There'd be all this peer pressure. And then I moved to LA and I was like, I don't drink. And everyone's like, oh, we support you. Friend of whoever. I'm like, no, I'm not an alcoholic. I just don't drink. And then in Florida, like people get really upset with me that I don't drink. So what I did was I created this whole line of I call them Dirty Virgin Girl drinks. So there's the Dirty Virgin Martini, which is basically water with a little bit of olive juice and olives in it. So I look like a party without a party in my glass. And basically that's, you know, depending on where I am, it's like I have this whole recipe book of these Dirty Virgin recipes so that, you know, I don't have to drink. But you know, it's really just been a choice, and it never it gets other people like more self-conscious than me. Like I have no problem being around people who are drunk. I've been a designated driver since I was 15. So, it doesn't bother me, but it's just interesting, to see other people's reaction when they're drinking and I'm not.
Well, with some of those drinks, though, you can kind of disguise it. Yeah, you mentioned Dirty Virgin drinks. What's the DV Sisterhood?
The Dirty Virgin Sisterhood is based on the book that I wrote called Dirty Virgin. It's a romantic comedy girl self-inflicted 12-step program for finding her happily ever after. So basically, it started out as a fiction book that I wrote just to, while I was out of LA, I didn't have time to work on a script because it's so consuming, and I just was writing a blog, and then I turned into writing this fiction book. And one of my friends wrote to me and she said, I just wanted to let you know that I've read your book 3 times and I'm using it as my life manual. And I was like, So I created the 12 steps for finding your happily ever after based on what my character went through. And it's really a community for women to just have like anonymity where they can choose their own like name. And because, when I was growing up, like we all had nicknames for each other, and so you have everyone has nicknames, and they can have this community where they can just kind of vent about like what's going on in their lives and talk about things that are coming up for them. And like the things I talk about on the podcast, like it's called Finding Happily Ever After, the do's, the don'ts, the dirt. And the dirt is my dirt. Like I share what's going on with me. And then I have so many people come up to me and they're like, oh my gosh, the same thing happened to me once and I was blah, blah, blah. And like, it's like something that's embarrassing and you're not allowed to talk about it in public out loud. But on the forum, everyone can share whatever they want. It's just to have fun again, to get back in touch with, that kid that you were back when you were young and making that time to do the things now. Like I have a picture of myself as a 4-year-old on a swing. And then I have right next to it a picture of myself as a 44-year-old on a yoga swing. So it's just finding the things now that get you back in touch with that feeling of when you were young and the things that made you happy so that you can get back. I mean, people are just, the reason why we're here is to experience joy, to feel happiness. And so many people are not, because they get caught up in the to-do list. They get caught up in taking care of everybody else. And that's just not the most fun way to go through life. And people can say, well, it's not all about fun and games. But you know what? Why not? Why can't life be fun? Why can't every day be great? It's a choice. It's how you're looking at things. And my goal is to teach women how to, and, men, hey, if they want to come along, how to live each day and focus on the things that are making you happy. Because when you're happy, everyone around you is going to be happy and things are going to change. A stressed out mom is going to have stressed out kids who are going to be acting out. And they're going to have a stressed out husband who's not going to want to come home because he's not going to like the mood you're in. So like everything you do that's stressing you out because you think you're helping other people and making things better is actually backfiring on you. And some people are too young to see that yet. And some people are too stuck in it to figure out how they can get out of it. And that's my whole goal, is to show them how simple things can get them out of it and to just look at life a little differently.
Yeah, and obviously the podcast, I guess, kind of came out as an extension of all this, from the book and from the forum and some of the other things. So tell us a little bit about that podcast.
Well, the podcast is really my experience of going from burnout to back, and, it's for super women, like super moms, super entrepreneurs, super business owners, super artists, super executives, super entertainers. And it's, they're short. They're like 10 minutes. And it's just to give them a fun recharge because we're all learning so much all the time. We're getting newsletters from everybody and we're seeing things on social media and we're seeing things on TV and we're hearing things at the offices and we're just constantly being bombarded with new or the same message. And I have found that people learn better when they're laughing, when they're entertained. And I've been an entertainer my whole life, so my goal is to entertain them And so they are able to get the message. And at the end, I teach them the do's and the don'ts, which are very either business-focused or health-focused or dating and love-focused or sex-focused or exercise-focused or time management-focused. And so it is very professional toward the end, but the whole beginning part is just me sharing some story, from my life. And then once a month, I interview a professional person in one specific area. Like I've interviewed, like I was saying, Terry Monham is the time triage, and I interviewed Sue Painter, and she talked about successfully meeting with people and networking and how to really create relationships. And those are all things, but we still have fun doing it. Like, I mean, Sue Painter is like one of the most professional women I've ever met, but that doesn't mean that one of the first podcasts she has is, Sue Painter's Sticky Wicked, and everyone's like, what is a Sticky Wicked? Well, you have to listen to find out. So,
you gave us kind of a brief summary of the podcast, and it is entertaining. Like I said, I've listened to a few episodes. One I did not listen to, but I have to ask, what do Comcast, Vagisil, and hormone balancing have to do with the importance of your business name? Because I have to know this.
Well, they all tied in because I had a really interesting experience with Comcast, and there were so I give 3 different examples of how, like, this product that I was using, it's called Berry Treasure, and it's a hormone balancer. And I'm like, why in the world would anybody who is like making a product for the Vagisil, like, call it Berry Treasure? It's like totally associated with the Vagisil. Like, it's like, and then what happened was I started using this cream that it was just like this anti-itch thing, and it had this title that had absolutely nothing to do with what it was. And I started like using it every day on this rash I had, and it wasn't going away. And finally, it was like the Target brand or something, and I look at it, and it's like made by Vagisil, and I'm like, okay, would have been helpful to know that that the anti-itch cream was for the Vagisil. See, that's an example of when you want to know what it's for. And then the whole thing with Comcast was this whole rant that I went off on with this guy who tried to help me out when he saw that I had blogged negatively about Comcast, and how I just went off on this rant. And you start to see, like, all these different little things really tie into how important the name of your business is, because, I mean, you got to think about, like just in my naming my book Dirty Virgin, okay, that is going to attract certain people. But I've been told by a variety of women that they would not read that book out in public. I've been told it's funny because when I take them to seminars and I have them out, more guys walk up to me and say, well, what's that book about? Can I buy it? I'm like, it's a chick lit book that you'd read. So, actually one of my mentors is like, you really need to rename that book, because who's going to bring you on their stage to market Dirty Virgin? Like, so they're like, Bliss Teeny is better, since I'm always talking about going from burnout to bliss. They're like, Bliss Teeny is better. And I'm like, okay, so you can get taken, you be able to speak on stage with Bliss Teeny, but you don't get asked to speak on stage with Dirty Virgin, because it makes people think it's an adult book or something, and it's really not. So that was, I'm not bringing the humor so much, because part of the whole podcast is me just kind of ranting about these things, and it's sort of like in the moment. But it's very important to look at what you're naming your business and why, because people could have a lot of different reactions to it. And I've talked to a lot of people about things that they were naming their business, and I'm like, that makes me think of, and they don't realize how many times it's making you think of sex. So many times the names that they think of that are cool or funky, or they're going to be, this is going to grab their attention, like either come up with like sex or violence or something that, like Breaking Bad. And like, Breaking Bad is a great TV show, and then they start associating things with Breaking Bad, like Breaking Badass, and it's like, but who's going to bring you to talk to kids if you're saying the word ass? Like, so you got to be like really careful about these things, and but it sounds cool. So you have to be careful not to share your business names and things like that with friends. You've got to do it with other business professionals who can think about that. And I also have a rant on kids with unusual names. So I'm not sure if that one came out yet, but I don't think it has. But it's really funny about how these people name their kids like Apple, and I mean I had a client who wrote to me, and it was like I didn't know if it was a male or a female, and it's really distracting because it just so it's that's a fun podcast too. The outside of the box names when that one comes up.
Yeah, and I will definitely have to look for that one because I totally agree with you. I think my son's name is Josh, and I think he has the only semi-normal name out of all of his classmates. Yeah, definitely a kind of a pet peeve of mine as well, but I don't want to go off on a rant about that myself. You said about your book and all that, and you actually wrote a second book that was more related to coaching, definitely not with a sexual title. No. So tell us a little bit about
and action, action. And action. It's a 52 chapter book. So it's 52 proven proactive business strategies for getting work in the entertainment industry. And it can actually, again, it's geared toward the entertainment industry because that was my focus. But I had one of my bosses at a company say, "Oh, I just lost 20 pounds reading your book." I'm like, "How in the world did you do that?" And he said, "Well, I just applied the same principles to weight loss." And I was like, okay. But basically what I've done is I give people 52 chapters so they can do something every week. They're taking action every week. And I've tied it into movies so that it's entertaining for people. So like the chapter on Mr. and Mrs. Smith is about creating a target list of the people. They have to kill their targets. You just have to meet yours. And so but it gets you focused on, okay, this week I'm going to create a list of who are the people that I want to get to. Who are the people in my industry who will help me get to where I want to be? Who do I want to mentor me, or who do I want as clients? And it's getting really focused. So each chapter does that. In the beginning, like the first third of the book is really based on foundational tools. The second is on mindsets. And then the third part is like bigger visions, like Gandhi is one of the movies. And it talks about how, you can do good while still pursuing your job. Like, I mean, why not get involved with a philanthropic organization where there are people in your industry who are involved? You're still doing good for others, but you're also meeting people and networking. So I talk about all those different types of things in the book.
Oh, cool. And we will definitely add links to both of those books in the show notes so people can check them out. And it's interesting because, like you said, with this book, a lot of that stuff can kind of be applied to real life. So, in your coaching business, it's targeted towards the entertainment industry and people that are trying to get into the entertainment industry. Typically, what types of professionals are you attracting with your business?
Well, with the Greenlight coaching business, I've coached over 1,000 people one-on-one, from newbies who are just looking to get into the industry and have no idea to Oscar and Emmy winners. So I've worked with the whole gamut, and I've worked with writers, producers, directors, actors, camera people, costumers, editors. I mean, pretty much location scouts. And then when I started working on this new brand with the DV Sisterhood and, working with women who are 35 and older, who are, helping them go from burnout to bliss, it's still coaching them in these same tools, but it's getting more into looking at the full realm of their whole, relationships, health, and work. So if they can see that if they want success in one area, they're going to need success in the other areas as well. Because if they let their health fail, they're certainly not going to have good business, and they're not going to be able to have good relationships. If your relationship is causing you a lot of stress and unhappiness, then it's going to affect who you're being at work, and it's going to affect your health. if, your work is stressing you out, you're going to bring that home with you, and it's going to affect your relationships, and it's, again, going to affect your health. So it's looking at how you get all three going at the same time and recognizing that you can still be really successful. It's not a matter of having to give things up in order to have one be great.
Obviously, some of the principles would apply to both types of people, but how does coaching people in the entertainment industry differ from that average 35-year-old housewife?
Well, I think that the difference is that, let's see, that's a great question, because the difference really comes down to you have a group of people in the entertainment industry who all know what they want to do. They've been passionate about it for a really long time, and they know what it is they want to do. They just don't know how to get it. That's the same thing with these women who are burnt out. They know what they want. They know they want this great lifestyle. They know they want to be happy. They know they want their relationships to be good and their health to be good and businesses and whatever, but they don't know how to get it. So it's always a matter of working with people from where are you now, where do you want to be, and how are we going to get you there? And it's clearer for what the entertainment people want as far as, I want work, and what that means is there are very specific steps that they can take to getting work. And if they follow them, they instantly, they get results. You follow the steps, it works. For the, but, granted, they have their excuses, but if they put that aside and they just do what I tell them, they will get work. Then you come with the housewives. There's a lot there, and it's not just housewives. It's female executives. It's female business owners. I keep bringing up like moms, but for the most part, like I deal with a lot of female entrepreneurs because they are following the same exact patterns that I did. And for them, it's different. They have different blocks as to why they can't do what I'm telling them to do. Whereas in the entertainment industry, they just kind of don't want to do what I'm telling them to do because it's outside of their comfort zone. The women who I work with, they will do anything I tell them. They want to do it. They want to feel better. They want to succeed. But yet they come up with blocks and reasons for themselves as to, well, I can't do that because then this will suffer, or I can't do that. Instead of just taking the risk like they do with everything else and recognizing, well, why don't I try it? Because what I'm doing right now is not working. And if I keep doing it, it's going to keep not working. So, I really see them very similarly because coaching is basically, like I said, finding out what people want and where they are now and how to get them there. But it's obviously coaching on two very different subjects.
Yeah, so how does ego kind of play into this? Because, you mentioned about people kind of being stubborn and set in their ways, on both sides. But they came to you for guidance.
Right.
How much does that ego get in the way of them following your direction and following your lead?
Well, ego definitely comes into play in the entertainment industry because a lot of times when I'm dealing with people who have been in the industry and had a lot of success at one time, ego comes in when I'm telling them, you need to get mentors. And they're saying, I'm not going to get a mentor. So I'm not going to get a mentor. I'm like, okay, have a business advisor. Like you can use another term for it, but you need to be asking questions. You need help. And they don't want to have to ask for help. And you know what? It's the same thing with these busy women. They don't think anybody can do it as well as they can. So there's the ego again. So they feel like they have to do everything themselves. They don't ask for help. That's where the ego comes in. The inability to be able to ask for help. Or just to even admit that these things I'm telling them to do that they need to do because, they think it's like they come to me because they know something's wrong and they say they're coachable. And then again, they come up with all the excuses and all the reasons why that won't work or I've tried that. I've been there, done that. And it's like, well, let's hear how you've been there, done that. And they've done it once, had a bad experience and then just never want to do it again. But maybe they didn't do it right, or maybe they were hearing it through the wrong filter. That's the thing, I once had a client come to me, and her goal was to get 20 referrals that month. And she said, nobody wanted to help me. She came in and she was practically crying. And then eventually she was crying. And I couldn't understand because she was like so professional. She's such a great girl. Why wouldn't anybody want to help her? So I asked her what happened, and she explained how she called this guy and said, I'm looking for referrals to second AC so I can move up from loader to second AC. I want to, ask him some questions about how to do it. And she's like, and then he just spent an hour telling me how to do it, and then he wished me luck. And I said, well, I really think he thought he was helping you because he was answering your question. See, it was your job to come back around and say, well, thank you so much for spending all this time and giving me your advice. If you know 3 more people who you think would be willing to talk to me about this subject, I'd really appreciate the referrals. And all of a sudden she was hearing it through a different filter, like, oh, he did want to help me. I didn't recognize he was helping me by answering my question, by spending an hour with me. That meant that he was, invested in me. And as soon as she did that, she was like, oh, well, what do I do with this? And I was like, what's this? And she had 14 referrals out of the 20 that she'd gotten before that guy. But she'd completely forgotten about them and blocked them out because she had made up her mind that nobody wanted to help her. So it was good because it created the call objective sheet for me. This way, that's when I created the call objective sheet so that people know what their objective is, and you do not get off the phone until you get a yes, no, or a counter offer. So this way it always brings you back to, did I ask for my objective and did I get an answer? So that's what happens when their egos or their insecurities get in the way.
You're right. Sometimes we, aside from ego, we do get so kind of turned around in our process that we do lose sight of the objective, why we started in the first place. Right. So I do want to circle kind of back around to your podcast. What do you think was the biggest challenge to starting your podcast?
The biggest challenge was that I had absolutely no idea how to do one. I didn't know anything about cover art. I read a little bit on iTunes about how to create one, but I had no idea how much goes into creating one that gets attention, that, you can see the album art, that it makes sense, that it goes along with your brand, that, you have to have, I'm with Libsyn. I wouldn't have even known that it existed. There was so much that I didn't know. So that was my biggest challenge, was just what I didn't know. That's what it always comes down to. What don't you know and who can you find out from? Yeah,
absolutely. And I know, you talked about mentors earlier. Mm-hmm. On part of a mastermind group for podcasting. Yes. It's seeking out those people that can kind of help you through those obstacles. You're doing a really good job because you were near the top of New and Noteworthy. Yeah. What was your biggest thrill to date with the podcast?
My biggest thrill to date was seeing the thousands of downloads that had already happened when it's only been up for, a short period of time. I think it launched in May, and I couldn't believe it. All of these strangers who don't know me, and then suddenly I'm getting, people are emailing me who I don't know, and it's just amazing to think that I'm reaching all these people. I'm just like, how are they finding me? And people are finding me on Stitcher and iTunes, and it makes me feel so connected to everybody, which is so fun. I love hearing feedback from people. I love when people comment. I love when people email me and share their funny stories, and I love when people want to be interviewed for my podcast because they feel a connection to it in some way. So seeing the thousands of downloads, that blew my mind. I was just really, really excited. And yeah, seeing myself in New and Noteworthy was very, very exciting. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm up there with that person and that person. Those people are famous. So
That's the weird thing. You're right. It's just saying, hey, yeah, wow, they're there. Why am I right next to them or I'm above them? Yeah, so it is definitely cool. So what can listeners expect from future episodes?
Well, they can expect shocking titles that always turn out to be something fun and professional. My favorite one, Does This Make Me Bi? That one has that one and my what's the best pickup line I ever heard. Those are the 2 most downloaded ones. And it's just so funny how people are like, does this make me bi? How does that tie into unique branding tips, and it all has to do with this really unique massage chair at this hair parlor and the whole experience. That's number 13. So guys, go check out number 13. And the best pickup line I ever heard is episode 5. So check those out. But it's just, how I just keep, living my romantic comedy life and finding a way to tie it somehow into something that's important to you guys, so that while you're laughing along, you can get some great life lessons along the way. And that will hopefully bring you from burnout to bliss, or hopefully you'll never have to go out to burnout. You can just go straight to bliss.
Absolutely. Well, you're kind of an open book. I mean, you've told us a lot. So if you listen to the podcast, but tell us something that your listeners don't know about you already.
Oh, yeah. I don't know that there is. They don't know about me already. Well, something they don't know about me already is that I have recently started dating someone. So it's going to be very interesting. I haven't really dated, liked somebody in probably about 4 years now. So, and he really doesn't want me sharing anything. So that's going to be my biggest challenge, is how do I get all the good details out without, revealing who he is. So that
may be your biggest challenge to come. Exactly. I have the feeling.
He's going to have to just learn to live with it.
Well, congratulations on that, because listening to some of your other episodes, that's definitely an accomplishment. So, one other thing, you have a reality show coming up soon.
Yes.
So it's called Lights, Camera, Action. Yes. Now, I know before you couldn't talk much about it. Can you talk any more about it now?
I do know that it's going to be launching on a station in Colorado first. It's like The Apprentice meets Top Chef for the entertainment industry, only instead of me getting them fired, my whole goal is to get them hired. And that's still all I can talk about right now, is that it is going to be airing. So I guess, I don't know when it airs, I'll be podcasting about it. So I'll let people know that it's out there and ready to be seen.
Awesome. Well, hopefully everybody, tunes into your podcast. Tell us how we can connect with you.
Well, you can connect with me either at dvsisterhood.com or at jessica@thegreenlightcoach.com.
Awesome.
And social media. That's like the best place to find me. Just, friend me on social media.
And is it just your name on Twitter?
Well, on Twitter, it's Greenlight Coach. On anything like Instagram or anything like that, it's Greenlight Coach. But on Facebook, it's Jessica Sitomer.
Jessica Sitomer. It has been a pleasure having you on today. Thank you very much.
It has been my pleasure to be here, and thanks for having me on.
You got it. Hey, enjoy the rest of your vacation, too. Thanks.
Alrighty.
New and Noteworthy is brought to you by...
Do you want a new logo, website, t-shirt, or print design for your business? 99 Designs helps you host a design contest where a crowd of graphic designers compete to give you a design you love or your money back. Go to newandnoteworthy.net/99designs or click the 99 Designs banner on our website to learn more.
You've been listening to New and Noteworthy. To get show notes for today's episode, along with other great resources, go to newandnoteworthy.net. You can also connect with the show at the New and Noteworthy page on Facebook, or follow Dave on Twitter at Q Westwood. And if you like today's episode, don't forget to subscribe to the show and leave a review on iTunes or Stitcher.